a show title?
Yeah, it's in there, right?
Oh, gotcha.
And the trailer's all set because we'll run with that.
Yeah, I got it loaded here.
Mostly at the top. Do you want to test it out? Make sure it's playing okay.
Yes, right now.
Just want to make sure we got good audio.
Find new ways to communicate with
Okay.
people.
And you could it's okay if you make full screen?
Yep.
Okay.
I can do that.
Great. Oh, that looks great. Cool. All right. In 3, 2. It's Wednesday, May 16th, 2012. You've tuned into the 404 show on CNET TV. I'm Jeff Bakalar.
And I am Justin Yu. This is the show where we go indie for a day.
Just for a day, in our hearts, we're very lucky to have on the program today Lisanne, Pajot, and James Swirsky, filmmakers from the new film Indie Game the Movie. This is really cool because obviously everyone who listens to our show knows how passionate I am about gaming, and to have two artists here who share that same passion and actually did something cool with it is a treat for us. So welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being here today.
Cool. Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure. I want to show the trailer to the film because I just think it's shot so beautifully, and it's just really a really good piece of art. So before we actually get right to the trailer, real quick, tell us exactly what this film is, what it is about. We'll run the trailer and then we'll get into some business here.
Cool.
Yeah, Indie Game the Movie is a feature doc that James and I made about independent game developers. So we follow game developers as they make and release their games. And we followed Super Meat Boy, Fez, and a little bit of Braid. And so it's all about that creative journey of making that thing and putting it out there.
Very cool. So, it gets pretty intense at times. I want to run the trailer real quick, and we can get into more about what these independent developers faced on a day-to-day basis, which sort of blew my mind. Let's check out the trailer right now for Indie Game the Movie.
I am determined to make video games, and I make video games because I can.
I mean, it's the sum total of every expressive medium of all times made interactive. Like, how is that not? It's awesome.
My whole career has been me trying to find new ways to communicate with people because I desperately want to communicate with people, but I don't want the messy interaction of having to make friends and talk to people because I probably don't like them.
And it's not just a game. Like, I'm so closely attached to it. This is my identity. It's Fez. I'm Guy making Fez. You know, that's about it.
You know, making it was about, let me take my deepest flaws and vulnerabilities and put them in the game.
I'm on the line, me, like my name, my career. If this fails, like, I don't think I'll work in games again.
I'm like in a fucking concentration camp. If you can't get the work done, then the past 2 years are basically worth nothing. No pressure.
All you've been doing for 4 years is look at this, like this close. Like, you can't see anything else. You don't even see the mistakes in it anymore.
What the fuck is that?
All right. Very cool. What an engaging trailer. It really makes you feel like these guys are not just making games. They're sort of headed into battle.
It's intense.
It's pretty intense. So how did this get off the ground? Now, I know there's a lot of backstory. This film was funded primarily through Kickstarter. How does that process? Because we talk about Kickstarter all the time. And we're sort of fascinated by the whole idea of sort of crowdsourcing funding for stuff. How did you guys get from, hey, we have this idea, to, hey, all right, it's at Sundance now? In 5 words, go.
Yeah. It kind of, we ended up doing, like a long time ago, this short little 5-minute documentary on this one independent game designer, Alec Haloka. And it was actually a documentary for hire, this little 5-minute commercial piece. And we thought it was going to be like this little puff piece, you know, just the guy made a game, that's cool.
Sure.
And it ended up being kind of, the process of talking to him ended up being just a lot more than that. It ended up being like about this guy who, the more and more he worked on this project, the more it kind of became like this extension of him and this reflection of him. And it reflected completely what he was going through when making the game. And it was just, that was kind of like a new idea to us, the fact that games could be personal and an expression of something. And it's not a new idea because that's been around for a long time, but it was a new idea to us. And then after that, we, and kind of at the same time, we were going down to the Independent Game Summit at the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco and hearing all these stories, just like Alex, from all these other guys about, you know, basically just pouring everything you have into your game and then putting it out there, see how people react to it. And we were always taken aback at how crazy, dramatic, and stressful these stories were. And we were like, well, you know, if we can get that on film, that would be compelling. I would love to see that documentary. And then we looked around, and there were no game design documentaries, really. There were like a couple on the internet, but nothing really, really big, which blew us away because, you know, games are huge. They're bigger than movies. They're bigger than music, and there are tons of documentaries on all those. So we thought, you know, this is a story that probably should, you know, be told right now or start to be told soon. So we kind of did like this short little test piece with Edmund McMillan and Tommy Refness of Super Meat Boy fame, and we went down to Santa Cruz and kind of filmed a 5-minute piece with them for 2 purposes. One was to kind of like prove to ourselves that, you know, there is a movie here.
Like a proof of concept, like, hey, this would work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like just to us, to ourselves, to say, hey, should we devote a year of our lives to this?
Right,
That's
exactly.
Ended up being 2 years, but yeah. So we shot that piece, and then that was the piece that we put on Kickstarter in May 2010, and we'd done like a couple months of research, and you know had made this little like vertical slice of what we thought the film could be. And it like exploded.
And we should mention that Kickstarter at this point was like, it wasn't like Kickstarter
it was like
today.
Old school Kickstarter.
You know?
Right. Oh, this is when Kickstarter was underground.
Oh yeah.
This is old.
No, like before, like Tim Schafer and like the $1 million projects and all that
Absolutely,
stuff.
because that really sort of blew Kickstarter into the limelight. Really sort of
completely
lifted the veil on Kickstarter. And this was something that was getting that sort of you know, that sort of ground swelling from the start. You guys were able to do that way before all that other, you know, popularizing.
Well, like groundswell in that, like we were asking for 15,000, which isn't a lot of money to make a documentary, but we ended up with 23, and it was just we got funded in 2 days, and it was this life-changing moment for us. It was like we were 2 people from Winnipeg making videos, and all of a sudden there are people all around the world that like this idea enough to give us money in advance. Like that's crazy.
Pretty crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of like set in motion the next 2 years of our lives. Like we literally thought it would take a year, which is just silly and naive and stupid. And we not only that, we thought we could even like knock off a corporate gig or a commercial gig to help fund the thing, like in this year. And no, happen. It was like it's been 24/7 Indie Game the Movie since that day in May 2010. And then the Kickstarter just kind of took off, and we thought it would take about 30 days to get our goal. It took 48 hours, and then it kind of just kept on going, and it was like this overwhelming kind of surge of validation and people saying, like, yes, please, make this thing. Like, please tell this story.
Absolutely.
And, it's been great.
Yeah, I mean, the 3 games that are profiled are Fez, which just came out, Braid, which really sort of brought... You know, I feel like there's certain games that sort of become milestones for a certain genre or movement. You look at something like Braid that just took everybody by storm. So the developer of that game, Jonathan Blow, you guys sort of feature him as maybe like the grandfather of this movement throughout the film.
I guess so, yeah.
And I mean, and obviously
he's older. He's in his 40s.
He's a guy with perspective.
I mean, yeah, for sure. And that's the thing. And like, he's still a young dude.
Totally, yeah.
And at the same time, he's regarded as this like overseeing, authority figure on the entire indie genre, sort of giving insight throughout the film that's peppered through the stories of Edmund and Tommy and Phil, who I just lost my mind over him. We'll get to him in a second. John sort of gives insight as to what these guys are going through, and I found that the film really, there's a big debate whether or not games are art, right? That always comes up because Newsweek or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times will do a piece on that, and some authority figure who reviews movies will say, "Oh, they're not art. How could that be?" And I feel like this is the film that basically is like, look, if you don't think games are art after watching this, what is wrong with you? Was that sort of like an underlying theme that you guys were happy that was told?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, it was kind of part of it. But we don't really say games are art ever in the film. We don't even address the
right. Oh,
art
it's definitely not even mentioned directly.
But yeah, we thought, let's just show the process.
Yeah.
And to us, they're like any other creator. What they go through in the film is very similar to what we went through to make this movie.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like I think it was kind of like our goal to make something that, when people like leave the theater, and if someone happened to say, "Hey, by the way, do you think games are art?" they would kind of think back to the movie and say, "Well, they went through all this shit and they poured so much of their heart and soul into this game, and then there's all the technical stuff and the art, the artistry that actually goes into making it, that you can't draw any other conclusion. But these guys were making art.
Yeah,
but we never wanted to make a games are art film.
Sure.
But we wanted to make a, well, I guess games are art film because look at it, that type of mentality.
And I mean, it's only a logical sort of thing to draw from it. You watch these guys put their heart and soul and literally their lives into these games, and you're sort of like, oh my God, why are they doing this to themselves? These dudes they're in it. I mean, they go through some really intense stuff. At some points, it seems painful. They haven't slept. They seem almost malnourished. They just really are putting every last ounce of their life force into what they're creating. And to see them, maybe not straightforwardly admit that, yes, these games are representations of who they are themselves, you can just tell that, the amount of effort that they're putting in, what other conclusion can you draw from something like that? So I think the film does a really good job at sort of examining that and portraying that. Something that blew me away, and almost all of the developers echoed this sort of sentiment at some point in the film, was that they would die if they didn't get this game done. I know Tommy says it outright. He's like, "Look, I will kill myself if I don't get this film made. If I don't get this game made." What did that? You guys are sort of watching this develop before your eyes, and you're sort of piecing together this story that's unfolding. What did that mean to you guys? I mean, obviously, I think you guys can relate. Maybe not about the suicide aspect of it, but what did you think of that as it was unfolding in front of you?
There was just this intensity about it, and I think a lot of people go through this when they're working on a project that's like 2 to 5 years long, and they've invested everything they have.
Sure.
And if it doesn't pull through, they're screwed.
Right.
So, but it's bizarre to be on the other side of the camera and hear somebody so focused and so, so stressed that they get to a point where they're like, it would just be easier to die than just to finish this stupid thing.
Yeah.
Just because, you make this game and it's year 1, year 2, year 3, and every day in making this game, you get up like 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. or whenever you get up, and then you shuffle over to the computer and you spend like 14 hours, 15 hours there, and then you go back to bed, and then you do the same thing over and over and over again. And if you've been doing that for like 18 months or 2 years or 3 years, like that game, that defines you. That whole process defines you, and everything about that defines you. And then once that game gets threatened, or the process looks like it might not work out, you're left with nothing. You're left with nothing but in your mind at that time.
In the crazy mind.
In the craziness, you're left with the idea that like if this doesn't happen, I've just wasted 3 years of my life.
Right.
And so much effort and so much energy, and I could have devoted it to something else. And it's scary. It's
for sure.
Really scary.
And that definitely comes through. I mean, there's a lot on the line. We'll talk more about the passion that some of these, I call them characters in your film, but they're real life people. We'll get to that specifically. Phil Fish, the guy behind Fez, which is, I think one of the most entertaining people that I think unintentionally entertaining is a better way to put it. We'll talk more about that right after this break. Stick around. There's a lot more 404 after this.
This is the 404 MRFers, the show where we all sing songs.
Welcome back to the 404. We've got two fantastic guests on the program, the filmmakers behind the movie, Indie Game, the movie. Lisanne and James are here with us. So happy you guys are here. We're having a lot of fun with you. Finding about what people go through in developing independent games. And, you know, I think when you mirror the game industry to the film industry, you guys sort of walk a fine line, it feels like, with the subject matter that you're dealing with. You know, a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, indie movies really aren't indie. It's just the biggest example I always give people is Warner Brothers independent. Like, is that not a big oxymoron in itself?
Yeah.
When you look at these independent games, I mean, these are two dudes in someone's bedroom. You know, these are two dudes who really are, you know, scraping for whatever they can. Do you think there's a big misconception in terms of what indie gamers are defined as, or indie developers are defined as, from film to games?
Oh, probably. I think you could probably get a lot more done, like independently, like as a video game artist. There seems to be, you need to depend on so many other people, and the crew needs to be so much bigger.
Right.
And distribution is just much more, has many more gatekeepers in film than it does in video games. Although that does seem to be changing quite a bit. But like I think you have probably more power, more latitude to be independent as a video game designer. I think, like, completely independent, because all you really need is your ideas, your computer, and your software, and you can put it up on the iTunes store. That's it. Yeah.
And that's
like, look at Minecraft. Minecraft is just two guys, or
it was one guy.
One guy. Yeah, and
now
it's grown.
Like 10.
Yeah, and just in Sweden.
But still, it's
pre-orders.
only 10, and they've done like $100 million.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Let's talk a little about Phil Fish, who is behind the game Fez. You guys told an interesting story about him and what he went through with his ex-partner at their sort of development company. There was a lot of legality issues. There was a lot of stuff that was going to prevent Phil from showing the game at PAX East. I mean, there are some scenes where he looks like he's just going to freak out. I mean, how much of that, what were you guys thinking during that whole process? Because when I was watching it, I was like, oh, wow, there might be a murder documented in this film as well. What was that like?
Yeah. I think, like, we showed up in Boston for PAX. It was our first time at PAX.
Yeah.
And Phil was staying at, like, this fancy Boston hotel, the Langham, and we got a room there, too, because he was staying there. And so we got this expensive room, and we walked over, and we're like, okay, so you're going to get ready to, get ready and get the game ready for PAX? He's like, oh, no, we may not show it. And our reaction was, shit.
Yeah.
Like
we have this expensive hotel room. You have to show it.
What are we going to do?
We're making a film here. This is part of the movie,
well,
please.
no, and we didn't know everything that was happening with him.
Yeah.
And when we showed up, there was a potential that he wouldn't have his business stuff figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
And
it was just so stressful for him, because this is the first time he's showing the game after 4 years of development, not showing anybody. And, there was such a big disappointment and a lot of waiting on his end. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and it just speaks to that moment where, like, you're in the moment and you are completely defined by the game, and the game is threatened at that point, and you feel threatened, and you go kind of a little crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
Phil acknowledges that he was in a really that's like the most stressful time of his life.
You could tell. I mean, it looked like he was just ready to pull his hair out.
Yeah.
He had his little, like, graduate moment too, and it was just sort of, it was very, it was very telling of what exactly he was going through. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
4
feel like
years of development.
His beard told the story. The wackier his beard got, that directly related to what he was going through in his mind.
Yeah.
But it's a really crazy story.
But it's kind of amazing that, like, he shared all that.
Yeah.
Because he could have just told us to screw off and be like, you know what, I'm having a hard day here, leave me alone. But he sees value in sharing the ups and downs of what he went through, which is really amazing.
That was a whole thesis of the film, kind of like, and one of the reasons why the developers wanted to be in it, because people don't know. They really have no idea
Sure.
what goes into development and how, like, crazy stressful that can be. and like you can explain it over and over again, but it still doesn't stick, right? Like it's just but seeing it hopefully can kind of make it a little more easy to understand, and like for the people that put thought into it. Like I think a lot of people don't put thought into like how a game is made, and that's okay because it's a game. You just play it.
Yeah.
But when you do, not many people know exactly how much of these guys are in their games.
Sure.
Yeah.
If there was one thing you guys really, as filmmakers, learned from this whole process, what do you think was the big takeaway for you guys personally?
About filmmaking or the
just
content?
about the whole process, what about the similarities with filmmaking and game development. Was there like a big takeaway for you guys personally that maybe is not so clear in the film itself? Is there like a big takeaway that you guys were like, you know what?
I don't know. Like going into it, we knew that we were aiming to capture like dramatic, hard stories.
Sure.
And I think we were still surprised at how dramatic and tough and hard the stories were.
Right.
I think one thing, like I wasn't a big gamer before we got into this, and I'm not very familiar with coding or any of the process, but what was particularly interesting to me was like how personal code could be. We don't get into a lot of that in the film, but we have programmers talking on and on about how the thought process of them making the game is something personal and is artistic to them, which was surprising to me because I just thought it was just a bunch of like letters and numbers and slashes. I didn't realize it was this whole like poetic thing for that person.
Like they could look at their code and like know where they were when they coded that, and
right.
like kind of like what phase in their life they're going through. They could look at someone else's code and kind of get an idea of their mentality and like what type of person they might be.
They like see the Matrix, and they're like those
falling.
Exactly. They see what's going on, something that I just can't wrap my head around for sure. Chat room is asking. What games are you guys really into? I know, Lisanne, you just said you're not a huge gamer, but are you, James, are you a gamer yourself? Is there something that you're playing right now that you're psyched on?
It's weird. We're making this movie, and I haven't touched a game in so long because I'm like one of those guys where like I like to play one game,
right,
and I like to play a lot of it, and I'll lose my life to that game for like a week or 2 weeks until like I reach that kind of saturation point where I just feel bad for playing it as much as I do.
Right.
But the last game that did that to me was Binding of Isaac, which is like related to the movie because it's Edmund McMillan's latest game, and that game had my number for a long time. And it was it was kind of like a roguelike, and it's kind of like this wonderful way to kind of dip your toe into the water of roguelikes, and kind of get used to it. And I loved it.
Awesome, very cool. The film is Indie Game, the movie. It will be out in theaters May 18th in New York, LA, San Francisco, and Phoenix, and then the 25th, which is a week from tomorrow, Miami and Toronto.
Yeah.
If you want to find out more about the film, and also, I believe you can also pre-order the digital release on the website right now. That's at indiegamethemovie.com. Make sure you go and do that. We can also follow Lisanne and James on Twitter. We'll link to that in our show notes today. And that's going to do it for us. We really appreciate you guys coming on the show. It was really great hearing all about the film. Like I said, it's shot beautifully. It's done really well. And if anyone is somewhat interested at all, hardcore, casual, in the process that goes into filmmaking, the good, the bad, and the ugly, this is definitely something to check out. So thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for having us.
And our pleasure, and all the best of luck with the film. It's great.
Thanks.
All right, that's going to do it for us today. 866-404-CNET is the number to call. Or you can email us, the404@cnet.com. Let us know what you think about all things Indie Game, the movie. You can also follow the game has its own. The film has its own Twitter account as well, right? That's Indie Game.
Indie Game Movie.
Indie Game Movie. There it is up on the screen there. All right, that's going to do it for us. We will be back tomorrow with a brand new show. Until then, I'm Jeff Bakalar.
And I'm Justin Yu.
It's the 404. High tech, lowbrow. Have a great Wednesday. We'll see you guys tomorrow.